How do you do? Oh, allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
And welcome to The View from the Midwest.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy?
Today, I'd like to talk about the conference realignment that's going on within college football. The first major point is who is in charge of doing all of this? Because it seems like at every single turn, what happens is you find out that, well, who you thought was driving this whole deal isn't the ones that are doing it. At first, we thought, oh, well, maybe it's the college football coaches. They want bigger conferences so that they have more of a chance with these divisions. You have perhaps an easier path to a conference championship where it's not based purely on record. You could have an off year and still win your division and get into a conference championship. But then we find out, no, well, it seems more like it's being driven by the athletic directors. Well, if it's the athletic directors, you think, okay, well, they're trying to drive up their salaries or whatever, and they want more money. But then you find out, no, the athletic directors really aren't making the decisions. Surely it has to be the college presidents. Well, several college presidents come out and say that they're in favor of staying here or going there or doing whatever, and decisions are being made without their consent, really, because it's apparently these quote unquote regents or curators or board of directors. And the problem with that is that these people aren't really even employed by the universities. It's not even their day job. They work in other sorts of fields like dentistry or working as a janitor for all we know. I mean, they're pretty much doing other things 12 months of the year, and then for a week at a time, maybe every 9 months, who knows, they come in and make these gigantic decisions that affect not only sports teams, but just the university in general and who you're playing and what your cultural identity is in terms of where you're going for athletic games and everything. And basically, it boils down to if these people are the ones that are really in charge of making these decisions, then that makes it just incredibly ludicrous. It comes off in a way that these people are wanting to sit there and pat themselves on the back and put their pinky up in the air and say, look at us, we're a member of an even more prestigious university and an even more prestigious conference. So, piddles to the Big 12, we're moving on to the SEC. Yes. And it's like, get over yourselves. Texas A&M, they left because they were jealous of Texas. And that's fine. You lost out on an opportunity to be a part of a $300 million network. They had egg on their face, and they had to get out. I don't agree with it. I don't really understand it, but fine. Moving on to the University of Nebraska, it's like they were jealous of Texas too. How the heck Colorado got out, nobody seems to know. Nobody really understands why the Pac 12 would want them. Nobody understands why they got accepted over there, but somehow they did. Fine, more power to them. They got accepted into a conference that was equal to, perhaps better on some aspects than the Big 12. It's like, fine, I thought it was dumb. Whatever. Moving on to the University of Missouri. Now, I will freely admit that I am a graduate of the University of Kansas, so I am slightly biased in this. But on the flip side, you've got the University of Missouri, who is a rising program. They're doing a lot of good things. I hate to say it, but they have a pretty good football coach who has managed to recruit a lot of good talent and put them in a system to where it works for them. And they have managed to put themselves in a position to where they're ranked quite often. They're playing in bowl games consistently. They're improving their program step by step. But he wants to go to the SEC. His alumni want to go to the SEC. Media in St. Louis wants them to go to the SEC. Are you are you really that high? You will be destroyed if you go to the SEC. They will not beat Alabama. They've got a better shot at beating Oklahoma than they do Alabama or LSU or Florida or any of the big name teams in the SEC. And people are saying, oh, well, but you go back to the division format where you've got a chance to go to the conference championship. They will never sniff a conference championship in the SEC. The talent level at these schools right now is far and above anything that the rest of college football has to offer. And Missouri, to think that they can compete on a year-to-year basis with these kind of schools, they are just out of their minds. Missouri thinks too highly of itself, and they need to get over that, because they're going to rip their program to shreds just so somebody on a board of curators can sit in a smoking room like a gentleman from the 1800s, smoking a big cigar and swilling brandy and saying, oh, look at us, we're in the SEC, we matter now, and we've had our 15 minutes of fame. Well, let me tell you something, Missouri. Your 15 minutes of fame are going to be much shorter than 15 minutes as soon as you play one of those big name teams like Alabama, because you will be wiped off the face of the map.
Now look here, me bucko.
But I'm tired of this situation. The St. Louis media on ESPN radio on the local show, and they're sitting there saying, oh, well, yeah, adding Texas Christian to the Big 12 is a fine move, and it's moving the conference a little bit more Texas-centric and getting it back to the old Southwestern Conference, which admittedly it is doing. It's adding another South team. There are plenty of North teams that are still in the mix, but their whole point was, oh, well, they're just adding teams on the bottom of the league, teams to be fodder for the University of Oklahoma and the University of Texas and possibly even Oklahoma State. And they're saying that it's not fair for the rest of the teams in the league, and that's why Nebraska left, and that's why Colorado left, and that's why A&M is leaving, and that's why Missouri's going to leave. Number one, Missouri isn't out yet. Right now, while they do have a little bit of support as the 14th team to the SEC, they don't have the votes. They're making this up because they have so many people in the media that it's being propagated that the idea is in cement. It's not in cement. Missouri might as well just face the fact that it's probably 50-50 at best that they leave right now, because they do not have the votes to win a spot in the SEC. Yet, it could happen. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say there's no way that they're leaving when they very well could. But Missouri keeps shooting itself in the foot with these comments that their sources give to the media. They went out and said, oh, yeah, well, the Big 12 is trying to save itself from utter destruction. Well, we're thinking about joining the SEC. That didn't sit well with the SEC. They wanted to keep that quiet, that they had a backdoor deal, that if the Big 12 conference fell apart, Missouri would be invited. They shot themselves in the foot there. Everything calms down. The Big 12 kind of saves itself. And then Missouri shoots itself in the foot again by not only saying that they're still thinking about going to the SEC, but saying that their number one choice was to go to the Big 10. Fine, that's your number one choice. You keep that in the back room. You don't sit there and tell the media, who's going to tell everybody in the country, that you wanted to go to the Big 10. Oh, but the SEC's our only option now. Like, you've got the best football conference in the country right now. You don't sit there and say they were our second choice or they are all we have left right now. Are you really that stupid, Missouri? Get with it. If you really want to leave, you need to keep quiet. Keep quiet.
It's as simple as that.
The bottom line is Missouri could go to the SEC. I don't agree with it. They will get destroyed. I'd be willing to put money down on that. The best that they can expect to be is a step above Vanderbilt, a little bit above Kentucky, maybe on par with Tennessee and Arkansas. And while you can say, oh, well, those schools have pretty good pedigree in football, it's like, how much do you really hear about them? You hear about Auburn, you hear about Florida, you hear about Georgia, you hear about Alabama, you hear about LSU, maybe even Arkansas every once in a while, but once Arkansas loses to one of the big teams, they disappear. The point is that they fall off the page after a little while, and then you're not talked about. And these people in the media, they want to sit there and say, oh, well, Missouri will be on par with these people. No, you will not. To think that Missouri is not the fodder for these SEC teams the same way that they're claiming Texas Christian and Louisville or BYU or whoever gets added to the Big 12, they're claiming that those teams are just going to fill out the bottom of the Big 12 conference and be teams to be beaten up on by Oklahoma and Texas. To honestly sit here and think that Missouri isn't in the same exact boat going to the SEC, that the SEC is pretty much like, well, they got a pretty good team. They'll lift our schedule a little bit, but we're going to destroy them. If they honestly believe that that's not what these SEC powerhouses are thinking, then Missouri needs to wake up. The media here in St. Louis needs to wake up, because I'd like to be as delusional as some of these people and have the belief that my teams that I love are honestly going to compete on the football field with some of these other teams. Now, moving on, we have TCU coming into the Big 12. At least it's not official, but for all intensive purposes, it is. Their board of curators hasn't officially approved the move, but the Big 12 has officially extended them an invitation, and they reportedly granted the Big 12 their TV rights, which is what all other 9 schools, I believe, perhaps it's only 8. I'm not sure what Missouri has decided to do with their flirtation with these other conferences. But they've all given up their TV rights for a year extended beyond the current TV deal, which to me is starting to get into a place to where it's fair for all teams. And that's coming from a University of Kansas alumni in which we're actually giving up quite a bit because we were the number 3 revenue team in the overall conference because of our basketball schedule. So Kansas has actually given up quite a bit here. They might be losing out on money, but it's to get stability. And that's what Missouri doesn't seem to understand. They want to go to the SEC. Fine, the SEC isn't in danger of breaking up anytime soon. But they're going to go over there and become an also-ran. They're going to become a nobody. They're going to become, oh, that team off to the Northwest where we go every few years. And the thing that I think is funny is I was at Kansas during one of the worst football periods in the school's history under Terry Allen. There were 20,000 fans in a 50,000 seat football stadium. Now, that's not as high as some of these other stadiums, but when you see it that empty, or when you see it 75% full of your opposing fans, I don't think Missouri knows what they're in for, because if they have a few losing seasons in the SEC, they are going to experience this firsthand, and it is no fun. I can guarantee you that. It is not fun to go into your stadium on game day and see it full of red when you're playing Oklahoma or Nebraska, or in Missouri's case, if they go to the SEC, there's going to be a bunch of blue for Florida. There's going to be a bunch of crimson for Alabama. There's going to be a bunch of purple and gold when LSU comes to town. It's like, yeah, it's good for the economy because they're going to be spending their dollars there in Columbia, but it isn't good for your football team because they're not getting the support that they want to pull off big victories there at home. Moving back to the TCU thing, I think it's a good thing. TCU brings some credibility. They're down a little bit this year. They've fallen out of the rankings, but they're playing in the Mountain West still, so that becomes a little difficult to try to rebound from that. They're going to move to the Big 12, and if they keep their recruiting base strong, they'll be a good addition to the conference, and I think it's a strong move. And it's something that the Big 12 should have been doing since the beginning. Ever since people started moving around, the Big 12 needed to look for additions, and they refused to do it. I don't know whether that was BB's fault or whether it was Texas and Oklahoma not wanting to add to the conference or what the deal was. But the baseline point right now is they have finally made some additions, and that's what they needed to be doing all along. They needed to be out there looking for teams. The Big 12 right now has some of the best football in the country outside the SEC. They've got Texas ranked, they've got Oklahoma ranked. Until last week when they lost, Baylor was ranked for the first time in who knows how long. Kansas State is ranked. Missouri started the year ranked. Kansas was good up until the last couple years. There are good football programs in the Big 12, and I never understood in the first place why everybody was trying to get out. But everybody wanted to jump ship because Texas is being unfair. Texas is looking out for Texas, and that's fine if everybody else wants to look out for themselves. That's what they should be doing, but they need to be smart about it. Nebraska got a good deal going to the Big 10. They're going to be able to compete in there because they're in a weak division. Missouri going to the SEC, I don't care if Auburn moves to the East or not. They're going to still have to play Alabama every year. They're still going to have to play LSU every year. They're going to have to play Arkansas every year. Within those three teams, there's no way you're beating all three of them. There's no way that they get to a conference championship. So that's going to wrap it up here for this edition of the Rantings of the Last Sane Sports Fan. Hope you enjoyed today's show, and I'm going to try to do another one here shortly. So until next time, see you later.
I remember